Natalie, so great to see you.
Great to see you, Clint.
Great to have you in studio here. I'm just so impressed with everything you have done for the state of Utah and continue to do. It's remarkable. I think you should be governor of Utah.
Okay.
I've said that numerous times. But I maybe start with why are you so passionate about this state?
Well, I mean, I'm a local. I'm a native. I have deep roots here. There's something about this state that speaks to what I do. I love to ski. I love the Red Rock. I really love youthfulness, optimism, problem solving, trust. Some of the things that we're really good at here in Utah. And at a pretty young age, at least, if you're thinking of what's your career going to be, what are you going to study? I knew pretty early that I was really motivated by public policy, by public service. And so started that a long time ago. And I tell people, if you do it, you get up at 6 a.m. for 30 years, something good happens. So.
And you've played so many roles in this state, and you hold so many positions right now. What are all the positions you currently hold right now?
I am a full-time employee of the University of Utah.
Yeah,
and I love working at the U. It is a remarkable place filled with talented people, and really economic bedrock for this state. Because training the workforce it trains, it's like 60 some odd % of the STEM degrees in the state, are coming through that university. We're on our way towards $1 billion of externally funded research that we're doing for the state. Incredible. It's the academic medical center, for the state.
Incredible.
It's the law school, the medical school, the pharmacy school.
Such a great president too. I love President.
Yeah,
Randall.
President Randall's incredible. So anyway, I work full-time at the University of Utah. In that role, I have 3 responsibilities. I'm in the Eccles School of Business, so I work closely with my colleagues in the Eccles School. I lead the Kem C. Gardner Policy Institute. That's where I spend most of my time.
Yeah.
Think of it as a think tank, that serves this state. And then I serve on President Randall's cabinet. So I help as a senior advisor to the president.
So tell us about the Kem C. Gardner Institute. How long has that been around? Was it founded specifically because of Kem Gardner? Tell us about that.
Well, the genesis of it was a gift. The LDS Church had what was the LDS Business College in this beautiful mansion on South Temple. And they moved the business college, which is now Ensign College, but moved it to Triad Center, and decided to give this beautiful mansion, think of it like the governor's mansion, about 411 East South Temple, to the University of Utah. And President Pershing at the time wanted it to be a central gathering place and a place that served Utah. And what better way to do that than in public policy? So this was in 2014. And I had a career in working for Utah governors and working in Washington, D.C., and I remember the call I got. It was from Clark Ivory. He was chair of trustees at the U at the time. And he said, would you ever come to the U and lead a public policy institute? And so 2014 is when that happened. We spent 2 years planning the institute while we restored the beautiful mansion. Spent $10 million restoring it.
It's a beautiful
moved
place.
in 2016. And so now we're, 12 years in, roughly, building an institute that really focuses on the Utah economy, Clint, and demographics, really the base layer. If you're going to do anything in tax policy, in economic development, in human services, helping with our housing, problems, it all starts with economics and demographics. So we have about almost 40 people, incredibly talented, handpicked researchers that calculate and write and think. And our mantra is informed decisions. How do we help business leaders, elected leaders make informed decisions?
How many governors have you worked with?
I started with Governor Bangerter.
Okay.
Lots of incredible stories, being a part, watching his leadership. Mike Leavitt is really my mentor, and I've worked with Mike Leavitt for many, many years because he was governor for 11, and then I went to Washington with him, and then I worked at his private consulting firm. So I have, maybe 18 years of experience with Governor Leavitt. I also worked with Governor Walker. I helped with her, inaugural, when she became governor, her transition plan. Since then, it's, with Governor Huntsman, Governor Herbert, Governor Cox, I would say that I have opportunities to advise them, but I've never worked for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about where we're at in the future of Utah, but I think it gets lost a little bit how much we owe the Leavitt administration here in the state of Utah. I was at an event with you when he launched his book, about 2 books, right? About kind of his time in office and his career in public service. And as I was listening to everybody talking there, I was like, man, we owe a lot to this guy. Like for him to be like that thoughtful and to be thinking so far ahead on where this state was going, preparing us for like 2024, really. And, in particular, like there's probably no Silicon Slopes without him, given everything that he put into technology education and all these various things. And just his recruiting of tech companies, recruiting of capital to the state. I mean, there's probably some sort of tech community, but maybe not as vibrant as it is now. How much do we owe to this guy?
Well, I think he's a once every 100-year kind of leader. I know that both from watching him at the state, but I also know it from watching him at the federal government. I was told when he went to Washington, and I was on that flight after he resigned as governor, that, watch out, bone-on-bone politics. His folksiness isn't going to do well. I mean, whatever criticism or observation people had. And then I watched him really go to Washington and blow people away. A star in President Bush's cabinet. He has this uncanny ability to see the future, see around corners. Even in tech, this is a governor that had, he was the first governor to use email.
Yeah.
Just to give, it was a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
We were the second state to, to allow digital signatures. He used to say that he wanted to usher in the information age. One of the first states to have a website.
I think it might have been the first state to have a website. Yeah.
But he used to say, Gray Davis was the governor of California at the time, and this was before the dot-com crisis. So a bit of a bubble going on, in 1998, 99, before the 2001 kind of recession. And he used to say, I want to spend more time in Silicon Valley than Gray Davis. And sure enough, as staff, he was constantly flying there, meeting with tech leaders, learning things. And then he did, a lot of people don't know this, but he had an elaborate plan during the Olympics to have guests of state.
Yeah.
And he brought in probably 400 or 500 targeted people that we put him in opening ceremony. We had thought sessions that we'd do in the morning and then take him to games in the afternoon and evening. I went to opening ceremony because I was a host of someone who was a venture capitalist that he brought to the state.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's an extraordinary thinker and leader. And in economic development, you don't have an idea and a year or two later it's fulfilled. You have an idea and a decade or more later. When you're talking about building infrastructure or educating people. I mean, if you improve third grade reading, it really helps the economy, but not for several years.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, he was that kind of guy.
Yeah, and it wasn't clear, like, there really wasn't any venture capital to speak of when he came into office. There wasn't a lot of, there was WordPerfect and, the Nobel and some of these, but to like see the vision of like Utah could be a world-class tech hub and go out and do it is pretty remarkable.
I'll throw out a couple other interesting names. iOmega, that was a big deal to us back then. Megahertz.
Yeah.
These were, I remember when Gateway Computers brought a manufacturing plant here, how big of a deal that was.
Oh, such a big
But those
deal.
names, it just shows you how long ago it was.
Yeah, and the CEO of Novell went to be the CEO of Google.
Yeah.
Right? That's where he left. He left Novell to go be CEO of Google. That's fascinating.
So
and
an incredible leader.
Yeah, and Leavitt, I actually was talking to, I believe it was the CIO of Oracle on this show, actually, maybe about a year ago. And he said Oracle wouldn't be here were it not for Leavitt. And he specifically mentioned the Olympics and him being invited to sit in the governor's box at the Olympics. And he has since moved to Utah.
Wow. That's
lives
telling. Yeah, that's telling.
It's pretty remarkable.
It's remarkable.
Yeah, that's an incredible leader.
And he was the right guy because at the time, because he was a guy that I used to tell people he changed the motherboard of his own computer, his own PC one time. So he had that kind of, I don't know, avocation in him.
It's pretty remarkable.
It is. Sometimes we'd be driving around from an event, and you're in the governor's car and the security detail's driving you. And he'd say, hey, so-and-so, stop here. And he'd want to stop at an Office Max or something to go buy a modem or he even says something what we were buying. But so
That's awesome.
Special guy.
So here we are today, and Utah's changing and changed dramatically over the past, I would say, 25 years. To some people, maybe even somewhat unrecognizable, which is why I think we kind of have this bit of tension in this state around let's grow, and let's stop growth. And you're seeing it a little bit kind of seep into politics, but in the politics of the state. But really, like if you think about like the divide that's happening now around, man, we're growing too much and NIMBYism and like all of this type of stuff. How do we solve that problem? I see that as like one of maybe the biggest problems, if not top 5 for the state and for our leaders to solve is how we solve that tension.
Yeah, it is a tension. And just to put some numbers to it, at the Gardner Institute, we've written a monograph called The New Utah. And we try to describe this idea that the pandemic happened and we started looking at the data and we're realizing that something's changed. And in the 2020 census, we jumped 4 states in population size. That's a big deal.
Yeah, that's a big jump.
Yeah, for most of my career, we were the 34th largest state. We're now 30th. So we're a mid-sized state at this point. We are a lot more racially and ethnically diverse than we were. Early in my career, 1 in 10 Utahns were a racial and ethnic minority. It's about 1 in 4 right now. It's on its way to 1 in 3. I think by the time the Olympics are here in 2034, we'll be, up against that. We're also definitely a state that is getting older. That's sort of interesting. Our falling birth rate means we're not, supplementing with so many young, but we're getting most of our growth, Clint, from the outside. And this has been happening now for several years. As our birth rates declined and as our economy's been strong, we have a lot of in-migration. And we've now had 31 of 32 years of net in-migration. And when you add that up, it changes you. If I tally that difference between how many moved out and how many moved in over that time period, it's the size of Utah County.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time of the census, Utah County keeps growing and changing, but it's about 650,000 people. So, and your question was really about the tension in growth. And I guess what I would say is, it's not that our growth is greater than it's been. We add about 50,000 people a year, almost consistently. And so growth has been our constant companion. And Leavitt dealt with growth issues in 1995, and you'd had them in 2005, and you had them in 2015, you have them in 2025. But it is true that our canyons, I'm speaking of Big and Little Cottonwood, they reach a carrying capacity.
Yeah, they reach capacity.
Yeah, and Kimball Junction, where Park City is, you either have to really invest and tunnel under that intersection or you're going to back up. We've made enormous improvements in air quality in the sense that we have Tier 3 fuels and we're getting more electric vehicles. And even COVID helped because people can work from home and different things. But I acknowledge the tension, and I guess I would just say this to listeners. You want a worse feeling? Have a state that's in decline.
Yeah. Yeah, that you kind of don't get the option of just like staying put in life and
in business.
In business. You can't just stay.
Yeah.
Static.
And so I look at like the Olympics and I think, whoa, isn't that going to put more international attention on us? And isn't that going to make our national parks busier and all those things? And I'm like, okay, it's a 17-day event. Our national parks are already stretched. What the Olympics is going to do is give us the incentive and some resources, because it's a net win to the state economically, to actually help guide that growth, maybe solve some of the problems.
Yeah.
So I think growth is essential to successful societies.
Yeah, I think
Reasonable people can disagree on it, but I I know what it's like I lived in the governor's office during the Bangor administration. He had 7 consecutive years of net out migration. Geneva closed, Kennecott closed. We had floods, no capacity to pay for it. It's hard.
Yeah. You'd rather be dealing with the problems of success than the problems of decline.
That's what I think.
Right? Because you're always going to be dealing with problems.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like those things don't go away. I'd much rather be dealing with the problems of success. Speaking of the Olympics, and this kind of ties into downtown Salt Lake City as well, we now have a hockey team.
Mm-hmm.
We got the Jazz. Seems like we'll have a Major League Baseball team before the Olympics. Who knows? But it seems like we're on pace for that. And Ryan Smith is investing a lot of money in downtown, as is the state, as is the city. What does downtown Salt Lake City look like when the Olympics arrive?
Well, so, I mean, I think we're on the cusp of what I would term, and this is a Mayor Becker term, but a great American city. And you might say, well, what makes a great American city? Well, you got to have downtown housing. You got to have a 24/7 city, and the downtown population's doubling in 4 years. Some
crazy.
Of those big buildings you see down there are all people.
Yeah.
So anyway, you have to have downtown housing or dynamic urban living. You have to have a really incredible university, because universities are a vital part of great places. And University of Utah, not only where it's at, but I think you're going to see a growing downtown presence. So that's really awesome. I think it's terrific to have a headquarters for a global faith. Makes us very international.
Yeah.
Gives us beauty and investment in our downtown. I mean, the remake of Temple Square is going to be really beautiful for the city. I have nothing but praise for what Smith Entertainment Group is doing. Now I realize, I could realize some people can have, feelings about, does this pay for itself? What's the subsidy? But central cities decline if you don't invest in them.
Mm-hmm.
The forces of decentralization pull things to the outlying areas. You know this.
Mm-hmm.
And our city, our capital city, population declined from 1960 to 1970 to 1980 to 1990. I don't know if you know this, but it was in decline.
Really?
Yeah, it was losing population. It's just as Sugar House grew and then the next Sandy and it's suburban, growth. Community leaders started investing in light rail, Front Runner, Eccles Theater, Salt Palace, Bravenel Hall, City Creek. You can keep going.
Yeah.
But these investments had Salt Lake City turn the corner, and now it's the highest population it's ever been. And it's one of not very many core cities that are growing in our country.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think what Ryan Smith and Smith Entertainment Group are doing, what they're doing essentially is bringing in a lot of private capital. And then publicly, we're investing, not subsidizing, investing in the future of our core, our urban core, and refreshing it. And so by 2034, when we host the Olympics, it's going to be magnificent.
Is there a comparable city that you think like it'll look like by then?
It's interesting you ask that. The fact that we have 11,000-foot peaks right at our side.
Not really. You can't find that anywhere.
Nobody has that, And
I already think we're better than Denver, by the way.
Yeah. We're what everyone thinks Denver is.
Yeah, we really are. It's funny.
So what's a comparable city? I just don't know. That's, you mentioned, why are you so committed to this state? I look at the data and I look at the history, and there's just no place like us.
Yeah.
Let me throw some stats out. We have the highest levels of social capital, meaning we trust each other. We can measure that, and it's the best in Utah. We have the second largest share of households that are middle class. People thrive here. People do well. We have some of the highest levels of upward mobility. You grow up, in a neighborhood that struggles, you have a really good chance of pulling out of that.
Yeah.
I could do more, on the stats side, but these are traits of great societies when people have upward mobility, when they, are middle class, and when institutions still work, like social capital gives us.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is fascinating. I guess the people who might be a little nervous hearing that Salt Lake City is growing is the politics are different, right? Like the cap, and that seems to be true everywhere. Like when Austin was going through its boom, Austin is so much different politically than the rest of Texas, right?
Yes.
And so I don't know that it matters one way or another, or if it's something that people should care about one way or another. But certainly the politics of Salt Lake is different.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge you're spot on. I mean, if I go present to the City Council of Salt Lake City, it's very different than anywhere in the state.
Yeah,
and it's actually part of what's beautiful about the state, because we do have more political diversity, racial and ethnic diversity, diversity of background than a lot of people would think. I mean, Victoria Petro chairs the Salt Lake City Council. She grew up with a father that was in the military. She grew up overseas, spent a lot of time in Italy and in the Middle East. Eventually came to the States and is a classically trained musician. And I'm not exactly sure her path to Salt Lake City, but I love having that here.
Yeah, it's so cool.
It's not like you get maybe in Eagle Mountain.
Yeah.
But it's, I like to think of it as a family of a lot of diverse people.
Why do you think Utah produces such great leaders that certainly produces leaders above our weight, right? Like if you think about all of the, like we just talked about Leavitt, you've got Huntsman, you've got Romney, you've got all of these, even just recently you could point, even Mike Lee, who has become like such a huge national voice. I don't see that happening in a lot of other states where you get like these national figures.
Yeah. Well, and I'll double down. I mean, Stephen Covey.
Yeah.
Clayton Christensen. Clayton Christensen is arguably in the top 3 most influential business leaders of the past 30, 40 years.
No question about it.
Innovator's Dilemma, and he came from Rose Park, Salt Lake City.
Clayton's the best.
So, I guess what I would say is that, and I'm just being honest with you, Clint, I think the strong families we have here manifest themselves in success later on in life. I think that we have really good public education and higher education systems. I can look at the measures and see that we're not the best. Massachusetts outdoes us in higher ed, but we're in the top quartile or decile. We do pretty darn well. And so I think a great education system, I think great families. I think that the LDS Church has something to do with it. I'm a big believer in what faith and spirituality will do for your life success, regardless of your faith tradition. But the fact that people here, many, subscribe to something larger than self, that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Helps us succeed, I believe.
What about this point of the mountain development? How do you think we're doing there? We just lost Alan Matheson, who was incredible.
Sure.
And they're hiring a replacement. I don't know if they have or not. But how do you think that shakes out? That seems like maybe the most important project going on in the state right now.
Yeah. I'm helping with some economic development thinking right now with the Salt Lake Chamber. And they're very mindful of what they would call, signature real estate investments. Certainly Vineyard and Utah City is one of those. The Point is another, and Falcon Hill, Northrop Grumman, in the north is another. I think the Point is, the vision that Alan Matheson and the leaders there have pulled together is terrific. I do want to remind listeners how unusual this is. So just to put it really bluntly, for the state of Utah, or for state government to be involved in large-scale real estate development in a conservative state.
Yeah.
I mean, this seems like this does not seem like a Republican thing to do.
Yeah.
And that tells you why it's so, the promise is so great, because what the state saw is, roughly 600 acres of critically, strategically positioned land that could pay a dividend to our state for a couple hundred years. So to the degree that the Point is just a lot of housing, that won't cut it.
Yeah.
That's what the private sector might do.
Yeah.
Just give it to them if you're going to.
Yeah.
But if it becomes a center of innovation, if it becomes the place where, think of it like what Hill Air Force Base means to this state, that somebody made that happen. There's a lot of talk right now, Clint, of a new push for a critical minerals national laboratory. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, you're just hearing a little bit more
Yeah.
about that. But national labs are, if there's anything that's innovative, it's national labs pouring in of money to, be on the frontier of knowledge. I'm not an expert in this, but in the mining world, I think we have in Utah something like 40 of the 50 critical minerals in our state. So we have a really terrific geography for critical minerals. And you tie that in with innovation at Brigham Young University, at Utah Valley, at University of Utah. So those are the kinds of things you might see at the point, or we should see.
Yeah.
And if we do that, then this is all worth it, meaning state involvement.
Yeah.
But I'm really high on it. And just make one other point. And this is just Natalie speaking, but I don't think it's an appropriate place for something like professional sports.
Yeah.
Because that's redistribution of monies. This is supposed to be a new money thing. So I'm really pleased with how this is shaping out. I think that the Smith Entertainment Group and the state of Utah is making the right decision to invest in sports and entertainment downtown, and then have these other great activity centers, or uptown, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, what do you think about that tension? The tension between Salt Lake County and Utah County. And obviously, Ryan is bridging that divide. He's from here, Utah County. But obviously, he's investing a lot of money into Salt Lake and Salt Lake City and that vision. And of course, why wouldn't he have looked at Point of the Mountain or various places when you have to bring in a new hockey team?
And you got greenfield to develop.
Yeah, and you've got
you have to tear things down.
Yeah. It's like I could just do whatever I want with that land. That's something to think about. What do you think about this tension that there appears to be? Because it does seem like, I don't know if this is true, but is there going to come a time where Utah County is more populated than Salt Lake County?
So I'm going to answer that in three distinct ways. One is that sometimes it's harder to do the right thing. And I think that our state's doing the right thing in downtown. And there's a really simple reason for that. Downtowns have to hold on to unique things that you don't find anywhere else. An NBA franchise, an NHL franchise, a Broadway theater. If they don't hold on to those, they got nothing, because the economic forces will pull things away, and you'll get a hollow core with declining property values, rising crime, no, tax base to take care of it. And, that's Detroit.
Yeah.
So sometimes the right thing's the hard thing. We're doing the hard thing and the right thing. On the point about Utah and Salt Lake County, this is a very real phenomenon, meaning that it feels different, but I will tell you that it won't be long before they feel the same.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, and a way to think of that is that it's not like Utah County's becoming more Utah County. Utah County's becoming more Salt Lake County.
Yeah.
Okay, you follow this. And so, markets, economies, they don't recognize political boundaries. So the commuters, the flow of commerce, it's all becoming a single metro area. And so I think we'll talk about Utah and Salt Lake County for another 10 years, but before we know it, it will all seem the same.
Yeah, and I even think Provo is growing into a city of its own now. It's not just like this small town as much, although it'll never be Salt Lake City, nor should it. But, it does seem like Utah County, probably an interesting piece of this is over the past 20 years, I imagine a good chunk of the new wealth that's been created in the state has come from Utah County.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would also say that, the reason Utah County is prospering in the way it is, and it is a growth engine for our state, is because it has buildable land supply in close proximity to everything else.
Yeah.
Now, still, this is interesting. I mentioned that economies don't follow political boundaries, but we do. So we have their regions. They follow regions. Like what's the commuter shed and whatnot. So if we look at the Greater Salt Lake economic region, which includes Utah County, they're too connected to separate them. The mean center point of population in that region. So again, if the region was a flat plane and everybody weighed the same, where would it balance? I know that's a weird concept, but that's what the mean population center is. 21st South and State.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that.
But think of Davis County, Weber County. They together are about the size of Utah County, especially when you pull in Cache County. And so we have this region, and certainly there's a pool of population and political power and even economic power south, but the mean population center is still about 21st South and State Street.
Oh, that is fascinating.
It's fascinating.
That is
now,
really
that's for the region. If I do it for the whole state, and now I've got a state plane, and now you got to deal with St. George, and that population center moves to Saratoga Springs.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we calculate this. It's a super interesting measure.
Oh, interesting.
But I just also say that, and so in my mind, the more we can do to get these two counties to collaborate and act as one. I'll give you an example. It frustrates me that they have separate transportation planning organizations.
Yeah, that is weird, huh?
Yeah, there's a metropolitan planning organization called the Mountain Land Association of Government, and there's a metropolitan planning organization called the Wasatch Front Regional Council. I think they should be the same. But that's a big change. So that'll be a controversial thing I just said. But
well, it's true.
But those are the kinds of things that need to change. Because the flow of traffic does not care about the Utah County boundary.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, like, I always think it's funny because, we spend a lot of time in Lehigh. We have an office in Lehigh. And, it's like 10 minutes to get to Salt Lake County, like less than that.
Yeah, it's the same.
I'm like, what are we talking about? These are the same things.
Yeah.
These are the exact same thing.
And I'll just since I don't know when you air this and different things, but Brigham Young University, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, had a major announcement last weekend, or this week, I guess, about a medical center at BYU. I think this is a masterstroke.
Yeah.
And I say that as a University of Utah person who sees that when you combine an academic medical center of the reputation of the University of Utah and then have the international reach of this global faith and go serve global needs and humanitarian efforts, beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
But it doesn't happen if they fight. It happens if they collaborate.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they are pretty good at collaborating. Those two universities, my sense of it.
I feel that
at
too.
the leadership level.
Oh, I feel that too.
Football fans don't collaborate.
Yeah, no, I feel that too. I would say I'm in the Eccles School of Business. The Marriott School is amazing, and I think there's great, connection between the two.
It's interesting. We talk a lot about Utah County, Salt Lake County, and in reality, like we're saying here, they're pretty much the same and getting more and more the same every single year. We don't talk a lot about Sanpete County, Juab County, these counties that are drastically different than what's going on in the Wasatch Front and want to be different. And they love that lifestyle. And by the way, I do too. I love it down there. And so what do we do about rural Utah? What is the right balance to strike between, having them engaged in what's happening on the Wasatch Front and also keeping what makes
Them
rural
so special.
Utah so beautiful?
Yeah. Well, a couple of observations there, Clint. One is that there are 29 counties in Utah. There's a subset of counties that just struggle, that their growth is just flat, they're declining, and they get older and older as their kids leave, and it's not really clear what their economic future is. So that's one part of rural Utah, and that part of rural Utah needs a lot of investment and love. Then there's places like Sanpete County or Juab County. I mean, they're in close proximity to Metro Utah, where a lot of wealth is, and then they have incredible livability and lifestyle. I don't worry so much about them.
Yeah,
I don't worry so much about them. The other thing that I would say about places outside of the metro counties, I'm really motivated by the centers. So think of Richfield, Vernal, Price. When I work with policy leaders, I try to get them to think more about how do we invest in the centers, knowing that will help everything around it. Anyway, when you do that, it simplifies it. Because if you try to do something for Casharum, it's really, you have to really subsidize really a lot.
Yeah.
But if you do something in Richfield, it's going to benefit Casharum.
Yeah.
And so in economic policy thinking, we encourage people to think about economic regions and then centers within those regions, and it simplifies things.
Yeah. How about our political demographics? Is that changing at all? I mean, I know we're known as like the most conservative state. I don't know what that means anymore. I don't even know what, being a member of either party means at this point. Interestingly enough, which is a whole different conversation. But what about our like political demographics? There are people who are saying like, hey, Utah's becoming a purple state. It's on its way to being a purple state. Do you get that sense?
I think we're ways away from that. But I don't think we're a red state, a run-of-the-mill red state, if I could say it that way. Utah's always had a little different twist on conservatism. we were one of the first states to have immigration reform that essentially said if you're a person of goodwill, you're welcome here. This is what I would refer to as the Utah Compact. Utah was one of the first red states and still one of the only red states to have an LGBTQ non-discrimination statute on the books, that you can't discriminate in housing and employment because of someone's sexual orientation. That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
I think our investment in transit has been a lot different than some red states. Just trying to give you a feel for these places. Yeah. I think I would characterize all of our Utah governors that I've had the privilege to work with all as very much productive, middle, centrist type governors. They may not like being described that way, but I see Governor Huntsman, Governor Leavitt, Herbert, Cox as being willing to work with both sides of the aisle and solve problems.
We certainly do have moderate leaders.
Yes,
especially
at the chief executive level.
Yeah, at the governor level, and it does seem even like in the leadership of the House and Senate, it's usually that way. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it still is or not.
No, it
but
is.
I get the sense from even like downtown Salt Lake City, I think Erin Mendenhall is a moderate, leader and an incredible leader. I love Erin Mendenhall. I think she's
awesome. Amazing. But to that point, homeless services, huge red flag issue we've got to do better at. But we have, for the most part, there's still some rough edges, but we have basic alignment between the capital county, capital city, state, and the business community on what we should be doing for homelessness.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
They're on it. And this has been a recent thing. This has only come together in the last year. But you mentioned Mayor Mendenhall. It's because she was willing to be at the table.
Yeah.
And then you mention our state leaders. Used to be that homelessness was a city issue, a municipal issue, but our state jumped right in. And, that's a hard thing to do because you're taking on, a burden, meaning a financial burden. But our state recognized that homelessness is that important. These are our brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think economically from a macro perspective? I mean, as we talked today, jobs report was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Unemployment, I think, is up to like 4.3, 4.4.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously affected the market. I think it's down like 700 points today.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when this airs, it's probably up 1,000. So,
sure.
it's a really weird and volatile economic environment.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think we're at right now?
I get asked this question a lot. So in a general sense, the U.S. economy has been among the strongest in the world, through the post-COVID years, during COVID. Everyone's talked about recessions that haven't happened. People have said, a soft landing is really hard to do. We've been doing okay. So I guess my economic message would be, I think we've been through the toughest part. Unless there's some sort of shock. If Iran does something really crazy in Israel and it gets blown up, all bets are off for me. But I think we've been through the hardest part of a high interest rate environment. And I think the Fed's going to reduce interest rates in September. And I think they'll do it again in December. And it will feel different in about 6 months. Now that's my, just my private kind of forecast. But we're seeing enough. Well, if you adjust for housing, inflation's down to 2.5%. That's targets too.
Yeah.
That's a huge accomplishment to get it to there without a recession.
Yeah, without a recession.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I mean, people have pointed a lot of fingers at the Fed for being too late to start raising rates and whatnot, but September's right around the corner at this point.
Yeah.
And they're signaling that, and I think the data's leading them there, so we'll see.
Do you worry at all about kind of the division and divisiveness in the political realm of things? I mean, obviously we're in an election year, so we're all feeling it a little bit more, but things do feel different the past decade or so.
Yeah. My husband's a furniture maker, and, I work so much in public policy, but sometimes he'll say something, I'm like, wow, good on you, Chris. The other day he said, this current environment doesn't feel like the America I grew up in.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that's pretty powerful. You ask how I feel about the division. I hate it. Last few days, the Paris Olympics have been on. I'm so excited to turn on the Olympics rather than news programs.
Yeah.
The joy of competition and effort and, unity and these sorts of things. So I'm deeply troubled. I'm going to say I'm not discouraged. I believe in this country, and I believe in, our leaders, and that we can turn ourselves around. A great book to read is called The Upswing. If you're not familiar with that book, it's a Robert Putnam book. Utah, Shailene Romney Garrett is his co-author. But it goes back to the Gilded Age, and it shows all the things that we would do that were individualistic. And then you get all the way to President Eisenhower when we did so many things together. And then we just have now gone back to individualistic.
Yeah.
And they call it the upswing because it's the idea that we had an upswing before, we can do it again.
Yeah.
And when you try to look at some of their, well, how do you do that? They point to the young people. Gen Z, we need you.
Yeah.
We're ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think is like a top one or two challenge that the state faces that our leaders should be focusing on right now?
Housing would be very high on the list, housing affordability. It's not clear how you fix that, and it's deeply damaging to wealth creation for our young people and for recruitment of talent to this state. So I put housing on the list. I would put the AI age as a challenge, and knowing, this is a Silicon Slopes broadcast, but we have to compete in that age. And do we have the regulatory thinking behind that? Do we have the workforce for that?
Yeah. Even the power for that.
Yeah.
That's
yes.
another piece
that would
of
be
that.
Energy.
Yeah, because we talk a lot about the policy, and I'm not really sure what the policies of AI should be, right? And because none of us are really sure where this is going. I don't think we're going to have robots out to destroy us. We're going to be fighting robots or things like that, right? And so, yeah, we do need to figure out the policy piece, but we don't have enough power for any of that to even matter.
Yeah. Energy becomes one of these classic huge problem, huge opportunity for us. It's sort of like AI, but in energy, we have it all, Clint. We have oil, gas, coal, geothermal, solar, hydrogen, moving that direction. Battery storage has some promising things here. This is a state that, if I look at energy states, there's only maybe 12 or 15 of them.
Yeah, that's true.
Not everybody has it, but so we have it. And if we can innovate, we can do some amazing things. So, I like the idea of moving towards modern nuclear in what we would call Emery County. This is where our large coal-fired power plants are. They have the distribution lines. So I think that we do not have nuclear power in this state, and I think that's a place we should move towards.
I love that.
Yeah, and the way I read what they would call utility, solar, and the storage capacity, I think there's some really promising things there. So energy's on both my opportunity list and my challenge list.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we were, back in the day, what was the president that came here twice? Wasn't there a president who came to Price? Price was the epicenter of energy and all this type of stuff. I don't know who it was. Yeah. Well, we'll put it in the show notes once we find out. But it was a really big deal. We were a really energy producing state. Yeah. Particularly in that area you're mentioning.
Yeah. Price is, this, we've talked about it before, Clint, but it's only about an hour and a half from the point. It has beautiful red rock all around it. It has USU Eastern, so it has a university. Yeah. It's a pretty good airport. It has a lot of history, meaning, the mining history and the beautiful old downtowns and different things.
Helper is one of the coolest towns ever. I love Helper.
Yeah. So that's a classic example of a place in our state that could have a really bright future.
Yeah. Natalie, it's so great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you for the questions.
Do you have any events or anything coming up? Any way that people should try to get involved in what you're working on?
Yeah, our website is gardner.utah.edu. We have monthly newsmaker breakfasts. At the very base, the bottom of our website, you can sign up for our announcements. But we've just released several reports on the economic impact of the Olympics. Have some great things coming out, in the next 6 weeks. So we're busy.
Well, let me ask you that real quick, because I know we're short on time here. But on the Olympics, how should companies be thinking about how they should prepare now for when the Olympics get here?
Yeah, they should use it as back pressure to become better in every way.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't sound very specific, but I think the true impact of the games isn't the 17 days, even though those are beautiful and wonderful and a lot of money spent during those days, and it makes for an incredible state, but it provides so much incentive and motivation to get better. Our roads, our tourism sector, and if you're a business, to capture the opportunity to be in a state that has so much going for it, and then to make it so you truly shine in 2034. So a lot of your planning efforts, maybe you have a 2-year planning effort, do a 10-year.
Yeah.
I just use it as a motivator to get better. That's what I saw happen in 2002, and I think we can do it again. And just one other point, Clint. I think the 2002 games were very much about kind of showing we could do it and putting ourselves on the map, and we did it. I think the 2034 games are much more going to be about giving back.
Yeah.
Service.
Yeah.
Showing the world what that spirit can mean to, world peace, to unity, greater dignity. So I think I'm just seeing it in the Olympic movement in our state that we are so well put together to host the games as this compact, winter sport capital.
Yeah.
That and with our venues already in place and everything an hour away from the Olympic Village, that we can actually serve the country and the world. I think that's vintage Utah.
So incredible. Thank you, my friend.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Clint.